16. Guard takes over at school. Arkansas Democrat. October 1st, 1957. I arrived at school Tuesday morning, fully expecting that I would be greeted by the 101st soldiers and escorted to the top of the stairs. Instead, we were left at the curb to fend for ourselves. As we approached the stairs, we were greeted by taunting catcalls and the kind of behavior students had not dared to exhibit in the face of the 101st. Where were the disciplined ranks we had come to count on? I looked all around, but sure enough, there were no 101st guards in sight. Just then a boy blocked our way. What were we to do? My first thought was to retreat, to turn and go back down the stairs and detour around to the side door. But that escape route was blocked by those stalking us. A large crowd of jeering, pencil-throwing students hovered around us menacingly. We had no choice but to go forward. Where are your pretty little soldier boys today? Someone cried out. You niggers ready to die just to be in this school? Asked another. Squeezing our way through the hostile group gathered at the front door, we were blasted by shouts of nigger, go home, go back to where you belong. At every turn, we were faced with more taunts and blows. There were no sense soldiers at their usual posts along the corridors. And then I saw them. Slouching against the wall were members of the Arkansas National Guard, looking on like spectators at a sports event, certainly not like men sent to guard our safety. I wanted to turn and run away, but I thought about what Danny had said, warriors survive. I tried to remember his stance, his attitude, and the courage of the 101st on the battlefield. Comparing my tiny challenge with what he must have faced made me feel more confident. I told myself I could handle whatever the segregationists had in store for me. But I underestimated them. Early that morning, a boy began to taunt me as though he had been assigned that task. First he greeted me in the hall outside my shorthand class, and began pelting me with bottle cap openers, the kind with a sharp claw at the end. He was also a master at walking on my heels. He hurt me until I wanted to scream for help. By lunchtime, I was nearly hysterical and ready to call it quits, until I thought of having to face Grandma when I arrived home. During the afternoon, when I went into the principal's office several times to report being sprayed with ink, kicked in the shin, and heel-walked until the backs of my feet bled, as well as to report the name of my constant tormentor, the clerks asked why I was reporting petty stuff. With unsympathetic scowls and hostile attitudes, they accused me of making mountains out of molehills. Not long before the end of the school day, I entered a dimly lit restroom. The three girls standing near the door seemed to ignore me. Their passive, silent, almost pleasant greeting made me uncomfortable, and the more I thought about their attitude, the more it concerned me. At least when students were treating me harshly, I knew what to expect. Once inside the stall, I was even more alarmed at all the movement, the feet shuffling, the voices whispering. It sounded as though more people were entering the room. Bombs away. Someone shouted above me. I looked up to see a flaming paper wad coming right down on me. Girls were leaning over the top of the stalls on either side of me. Flaming paper floated down and landed on my hair and shoulders. I jumped up, trying to pull myself together and at the same time duck the flames and stamp them out. I brushed the singeing ashes away from my face as I frantically grabbed for the door to open it. Help! I shouted. Help! The door wouldn't open. Someone was holding it. Someone strong. Perhaps more than one person. I was trapped. Did you think we were going to let niggers use our toilets? We'll burn you alive, girl. A voice shouted through the door. There won't be enough of you left to worry about. I felt the kind of panic that stopped me from thinking clearly. My right arm was singed. The flaming wads of paper were coming at me faster and faster. I could feel my chest muscles tightening. I felt as though I would die any moment. The more I yelled for help, the more I inhaled smoke and the more I coughed. I told myself I had to stop screaming so I wouldn't take in so much smoke. My throat hurt. I was choking. I remembered grandmother telling me all I had to do was say the name of God and ask for help. Once more I looked up to see those grinning, jeering faces as flaming paper rained down on me. Please, God, help me, I silently implored. I had to hurry. I might not be able to swat the next one and put it out with my hands. Then what? Would my hair catch fire? I had to stop them. I picked up my books and tossed one upward as hard as I could, in a blind aim to hit my attackers. I heard a big thud, then a voice cry out in pain and several people scuffle about. I tossed another, and then another book as fast and as hard as I could. One more of their number cursed at me. I had hit my target. Let's get out of here, someone shouted as the group hurried out the door. In a flash, I leaped out of the stall, trying to find my things. I decided I wouldn't even bother reporting my problem. I just wanted to go home. I didn't care that I smelled of smoke or that my blouse was singed. Later, when my friends asked what happened, I didn't even bother to explain. Much worse than the fear and any physical pain I had endured was the hurt deep down inside my heart, because no part of me understood why people would do those kinds of things to one another. I was so stunned by my experience that during the ride home I sat silent and listened to reports from the others. They, too, seemed to have had a bigger problem that day with hecklers and hooligans. The experiment of doing without the 101st had apparently been a fiasco. By the end of the day, more than one of us had heard talk that the ST had been brought back. Still, despite all our complaints, there were a few students who tried to reach out to us with smiles or offers to sit at our cafeteria tables. Some even accompanied us along the halls. Each of us noticed, however, that those instances of friendship were shrinking rather than growing. There was no doubt that the hardcore troublemakers were increasing their activities. And without the men of the 101st, they increased 100-fold. President Eisenhower says he will remove the 101st soldiers if Governor Faubus agrees to protect the 9 Negro children with federalized Arkansas National Guardsmen. Chill down, my. Those words from the radio announcer sent spine as I sat doing my homework on Tuesday evening. I had hoped the rumors of the return of the ST were true. But according to the report, the same Arkansas soldiers who had been dispatched by Governor Faubus to keep us out of Central High would become totally responsible for keeping us in school and protecting our lives. Sounds like the wolf guarding the henhouse to me, Grandma said. Thank God you know who your real protector is, cause you certainly won't be able to count on those boys for help. She was peeking at me over the pages of the newspaper. I didn't know how to tell her how right she was. But then I couldn't tell her I had had the kind of day that was making me think about running away where nobody could find me. Did you see where Judge Ronald Davies will be going back to North Dakota? Grandma continued. He will still retain jurisdiction over your case, though. That really frightens me, I said. I feel safer with Davies being here. He is being replaced by Judge Harper from St. Louis. It says, bad news, I replied. I didn't know bad things about Harper, but I had come to trust Davies as an honest and fair man with the courage of his convictions. St. Louis bordered the South. That Judge Harper might not be as open-minded. Of course, there is good news here, Grandma said, rattling the newspaper. Seems as if some moderate white businessmen are getting together to oppose that special session of the legislature. Faubus wants to call, the one to enact laws that would make integration illegal, I asked. Yes, I hope they can do something to slow him down. Ike rejects Faubus's statement. An agreement falls through. Arkansas Gazette, October 2nd, 1957. The Wednesday Morning Gazette reported that Governor Faubus and the president had come to the brink of an agreement to remove the federal troops from Little Rock the day before, but at the last minute, the president called it off because he didn't believe the governor would act in good faith. As we walked towards Central that day, I was looking forward to having the 101st come back to make my life inside school at least tolerable. But right away, my hopes for a more peaceful day were dashed. Showers of loud insults greeted us. Straight ahead, in front of the school, I could see a group of about 50 boys waiting at the top of the stairs as they had the day before. This time, however, they descended on us like locusts. Get the coons, get the coons. The boys were brash and bold, behaving as though they feared no consequences. There were no parading 101st soldiers to stop them. Frantically, we looked around for someone in authority, but none was in sight. Minajan, Ernie, and I decided to retreat. But just then, Vice Principal Huckabee made her presence known at the bottom of the stairs. Tiny, erect, and determined, she stood there all alone between us and our attackers, demanding they leave us alone. One by one, she challenged the leaders, calling them by name, telling them to get to class, or there would be hell to pay. I had to respect her for what she did. Whether or not she favored integration, she had a heck of a lot of guts. We circled around to the 16th and Park Street entrance. As I climbed the stairs, there was no sign of Danny or the other 101st guards I knew. In fact, I didn't see any uniformed soldiers. Just inside of the front entrance, where Danny usually stood, I saw some of the same hooligans who had tried to block our entrance only moments before. They moved toward me, and I circled away from them and walked quickly down the hall. I was desperately trying to figure out why there weren't any teachers or school officials guarding the halls the way there usually were. I panicked. I couldn't decide where to go or what to do next. I was being pounded on my arms, my back, and my legs by angry students. Their blows hurt so much that my desire to stop the pain and survive overpowered the fear that paralyzed me. I got hold of myself. No matter what, I knew I had to stand up to them, even if I got kicked out of school for doing it. Dead niggers don't go to school, someone said, hitting me hard in the stomach. My first instinct was to double over. The pain burned my insides, but I stood still and stared at my attacker without flinching. He taunted me. You ain't thinking of hitting me back? I'm gonna cut your guts out, I said, standing my ground. There was a long pause while we stared each other down. It was a bluff, but it worked. Looking almost frightened and mumbling under his breath, he backed off. Just then, I noticed the members of the Arkansas National Guard lounging against the walls like cats in sunlight, gathered in small clusters with smug, grinning expressions on their faces. They had been watching my confrontation all along. I couldn't get used to the fact that our safety now depended on nonchalant, tobacco-chewing adolescents who were most likely wearing white sheets and burning crosses on the lawns of our neighbors. After sundown, I had walked only a few steps before I was knocked to the floor. I called out for help. 3 men from the guard gave further substance to my suspicions by taking their time to respond, moving toward me in slow motion. I scrambled to my feet. How I longed to see Danny, standing on guard in his starched uniform, and hear the swift steps of the 101st. As I felt hot tears stinging my eyes, I heard Grandmother India's voice say, "You're on the battlefield for your lord." I was as frightened by the ineptness of the Arkansas soldiers as by the viciousness of the increased attacks on me. If the soldiers had been armed, I was certain they would either have shot me in the back or themselves in the foot. I watched as they stood in giggling clusters, while a crowd of thugs attacked Jeff and Terry and kicked them to the floor in the hallway just outside the principal's office. A female teacher finally rescued the two. Once I was seated in class, I felt I could take a deep breath. For the moment at least, I was off the front line of battle in the hallway. But just as I was feeling a snippet of peace, a boy pulled a switchblade knife and pressed the point of the blade against my forearm. In a heartbeat, without even thinking about it, I leaped up and picked up my books as a shield to fend him off. He responded to a half-hearted reprimand from the teacher, but whispered that he would get me later. At the very first sound of the bell ending class, I ran for my life, only to encounter a group of students who knocked me down and hit me with their books. As I felt rage overtake me, I recalled what Danny had told me. When you're angry, you can't think. You gotta keep alert to keep alive. It was still early in the day, and things were so bad that I decided I had no choice. I had to find somebody in authority who would listen to me. Outside the principal's office, I found Minna Jane looking as abused and angry as I was. "We gotta get out of here," she said breathlessly. "You're right. They're gonna kill us today," I replied. "Let's call our folks. Let's call Mrs. Bates. Maybe she can talk to the army or reporters or the president." I assumed calling the head of the NAACP would at least get some response. Merely reporting this kind of trouble to school officials might not get anything except more of the same denial that there was trouble, or perhaps reprimands for being tattletales. Since neither of us had changed for a call, we reluctantly decided to go to Mrs. Huckabee, although we were afraid she would try and convince us to stick it out. Mrs. Huckabee greeted us in a matter-of-fact way, until it dawned on her that we might be using the change we asked for to call for outside help. "Wait a minute. What's going on?" she asked, trailing behind us. "We're calling Mrs. Bates. We need help. Maybe she can talk to the reporters and get us some protection." Just as we suspected, Mrs. Huckabee insisted we go to the principal's office to give him a chance to solve the problem. She assured us that he would be fair. Principal Matthews began to speak in his slow, plodding way, wearing his usual nervous smile. It was apparent he only wanted to stop us from making the call. I was in no mood to have him tell me I was imagining things, not with my leg aching. and the steel flash of that switchblade knife fresh in my mind. Either you give us some protection so we can function without getting killed, or we go home. I heard the words come out of my mouth, but I could hardly believe it was me speaking. My knees were shaking. It was the first time in my life I had ever stood up to any adult, certainly to any white adult. But I was on the edge, ready to take the risk, because how could anything the adults might do to me be worse than the abuse I was already enduring? Wait here, the principal said, his tone of voice leaving no doubt he was annoyed with us. Shortly afterward, we saw the brass approaching, General Klinger and Colonel McDaniel of the Arkansas National Guard, and a third military man I did not recognize. Klinger pointed to the two of us, most especially to me, and said, "You'll sit over there where I can look you in the face." Right away, I didn't like him, but I was ready to deal with him. The rest of our group was summoned to the office. Everyone was vocal about the severity of the attacks during the morning. Each one had a story about how the physical abuse had increased significantly. We told Klinger that his men were not protecting us, that they stood by, socializing and flirting while we were being beaten within an inch of our lives. Those guards are turning their backs to attacks on us, and we demand you do something about it, I insisted. Klinger didn't deny the charges. He explained that his men had to live in the community. We just want to keep living, period, I said. Don't talk directly to the guards. Go to the office and report incidents, we were told. I said, with all due respect, sir, how can we run to the office every time we want help? Somebody could be beating one of us at the far end of the hall, and we'd have to wait until they finished and let us up so we could come here to report it. I felt something inside me change that day. I felt a new will to live rise up in me. I knew I wasn't just going to roll over and die. I could take care of myself and speak up to white folks, even if my mother and father sometimes feared doing so. I discovered I had infinitely more guts than I had started the school year with. I had no choice. It was my life I was dickering for. I knew that Klinger didn't care about our welfare, not even a tiny bit. Young lady, Klinger said, eyeballing me, you are turning our words. I didn't say, but I cut him off. My friends and I will leave school if we don't get adequate protection. It's as simple as that, I told him. The others were obviously as angry as I was as they chimed in with their complaints. They voiced their agreement that something had to be done immediately. You'll have bodyguards. Klinger spoke with a definite edge to his voice. He summoned another soldier and told him to select 18 men while we waited there. Those Arkansas guardsmen were the biggest, dumbest, most disheveled hayseeds I'd ever seen. They looked as if they had slept in their rumpled uniforms. We stood there not believing our eyes, dumbfounded by the sight of them. These clods will trip over their own shoelaces, I whispered to Minnie Jan. Or worse yet, get us in some dark corner and beat the living daylights out of us, she replied. After about 15 minutes we moved out, or in their case, shuffled out. It was a sight to behold. There we were, followed by an absurd wall of not so mighty military green trailing us like a ridiculous wagging tail. We found ourselves laughing aloud, and the white students were laughing with us. For just one moment, we all realized the ridiculous situation we were caught up in. 4 of us went to our usual table in the cafeteria. The guards took up their posts, leaning against a nearby wall. When I got up to get in line for a sandwich, they fell over each other, trying to see where I was going and which of them would follow me. 2 stood in line with me, arms folded, tummies out, and shoulders rounded. Each time one of us rose to get anything, 2 of those clowns stumbled up to follow. It was a comedy of errors. As we moved through the halls in our oddball group, I saw, just a few feet away, the boy who had pulled the knife on me earlier. The momentary terror I felt reminded me our situation wasn't funny after all. I missed Danny. That was another feeling taking me over. Rumor had it that the 101st waited at Camp Robinson, just outside Little Rock. But I knew that even if he came back again, and again, there would come the day when he would be gone for good. Still, I was overjoyed when on Thursday we once again had our 101st bodyguards. Maybe they were forced to come back, because the Morning Gazette had reported the story of Terry and Jeff being kicked while Arkansas National Guardsmen looked on. As we arrived at school that morning, I noticed right away that there was a different kind of tension, as though everyone was waiting for something awful to happen, only we didn't know what. We had heard rumors of a planned student protest. I could see groups of students standing in the halls instead of in class where they would normally have been. Just before first period, more students began walking out of classes. Rumors about a big event reverberated throughout the school. I could see and feel a new level of restlessness and a deepening sense of hostility. I was on edge, waiting for disaster. Any moment, like dynamite or a group attack, or I didn't know what. They're hanging a nigger, just like we're gonna hang you, someone muttered. That's when I learned that some of those who walked out had assembled at the vacant lot at 16th and Park across from the school, where they hanged and burned a straw figure. That demonstration set the tone of the day. Belligerent student protests were firing up the already hostile attitude inside the school. Danny broke the rules by coming closer and talking to me, warning that we had to stay alert, no matter what. Near the end of the day, I was walking down a dimly lit hallway, with Danny following, when I spotted a boy coming directly toward me on a collision course. I tried to move aside, but he moved with me. I didn't even have time to call for help. The boy flashed a shiny black object in my face. The sudden pain in my eyes was so intense, so sharp, I thought I'd die. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I couldn't hear or see or feel anything except that throbbing, searing fire centered in my eyes. I heard myself cry out as I let go of everything to clutch at my face. Someone grabbed me by my ponytail and pulled me along very fast, so fast I didn't have time to resist. The pain of being dragged along by my hair was almost as intense as that in my eyes. Hands grabbed my wrists and pried my hands from my face, compelling me to bend over. Then cold liquid was splashed in my eyes. The water felt so good. My God, thank you. The pain was subsiding. Easy, girl, easy. You're gonna be fine. It was Danny's voice, his hands holding my head and dousing my eyes with water. I can't see, I whispered. I can't see. Hold on. You will. Over and over again, the cold water flooded my face. Some of it went into my nose and down the front of my blouse. Bit by bit, I could see the sleeve of Danny's uniform, see the water, see the floor beneath us. The awful pain in my eyes had turned into a bearable sting. My eyes felt dry, as though there were a film drawn tight over them. What was that? I don't know, Danny said. Maybe some kind of alkaline or acid. The few drops that got on your blouse faded the color immediately. Hey, let's get you to the office so we can report this. You gotta get to a doctor. No, I protested. Why not? School's almost over. I want to go home, right now. Please, don't make me. I felt tears. I knew he hated me to cry, but the thought of going to the office made me crazy. First, couldn't handle having some hostile clerk telling me I was Mac. Ain't mountains out of molehills. Calm down. You can do what you want, but... No, home right now, I said, cutting Danny off. A short time later, an optometrist examined my eyes and studied the spots on my blouse. He put some kind of soothing substance into my eyes and covered them with eye patches. As I sat there in the dark, I heard him say, whoever kept that water going in her eyes saved the quality of her sight. If not, her sight itself. She'll have to wear the patch overnight. She'll have to be medicated for a while. She'll need to wear glasses for all close work. I'd really like to see her wear them all the time. I'll need to see her once a week until we're certain she's... All right, glasses, all the time, I thought. No boy wants to date a girl with glasses. Despite the doctor's instructions to wear an eye patch for 24 hours, I had to take it off. I couldn't let the reporters see me with the patch because they would ask questions and make a big deal of it. By the time we got home, it was 7 o'clock, and I wasn't very talkative for the waiting reporters. Once inside, I fell into bed, too exhausted to eat dinner. Thank you, God, I whispered. Thank you for saving my eyes. God bless Danny, always. The hanging, stabbing, and burning of a Negro effigy near Central High Arkansas Gazette, October 4th, 1957. The newspaper story contained several vivid pictures of sin. Trowel High students gathered the day before, hanging the effigy, then burning it. They were smiling gleefully as though they were attending a festive party. You made it. It's Friday, Danny said, greeting me at the front of Central once more. Your peeper's okay. My eyes still felt very dry and tight. There were floating spots before them, but I could see. They only stung when I went too long without putting the drops in. Later that afternoon, there was a movie star, someone I'd never heard of, speaking before a pep rally, Julie Adams, a former student. She was there to boost spirits because, she said, Central High School's reputation was being tainted. Over the weekend of October 5th, a great thing happened that took the Little Rock School integration from the front pages of the national news. The Russians launched their 184-pound satellite, Sputnik. But as the next week began, local radio, television, and newspapers claimed that scent guards were following U.S. females to the lavatory and harassing white girls. GIs in girls' dressing rooms, FAUBUS says, ran as a banner headline in the Gazette for Monday, October 7. Of course, it wasn't true. However, it made the military tighten up rules about where soldiers could or could not go with us and prompted them to launch a massive internal investigation. I could see a steady erosion in the quality of security in response to charges of interference by the soldiers. It was evident, as the early days of October passed, that whenever the SIN troops relaxed their guard or were not clearly visible, we were in great danger.